On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
We are still alive and thriving, and it's thanks to our ancestors that paved the way for us. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'echianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
That's the voice of filmmaker Kai Balin saying a Jewish prayer of gratitude last year while he stands in a long-neglected cemetery in Romania at the grave belonging to his paternal Jewish great-grandfather, who died just before the start of the Second World War. And while Balin's ancestor has a final resting place, his wife, Kai's great-grandmother, Gisela, does not. She was murdered at Auschwitz in 1944. Her son, Kai's grandfather, survived the Holocaust, so the story goes, by escaping from a labor camp. No one from the Balin family had visited this cemetery for nearly half a century before Kai and his sister Justine went on a roots trip last fall, cameras in tow, to seek out the family's history and Kai Balin's own Jewish identity, his deeply personal quest to find out how Jewish he truly is and whether that matters, is the subject of his first feature-length documentary called Son of a Seeker. It has its Toronto premiere on August 20th. The whole journey was sparked by a discovery Kai Balin never expected. It happened shortly after October 7th. He was working as a waiter in Nashville, Tennessee, and at the time, like many diaspora Jews in the immediate aftermath of the Hamas attack on Israel, Balin felt he needed to reconnect with his Jewish faith. He was raised in Vancouver's Jewish community, attended the Talmud Torah and King David High School. His family were prominent members of the Reform synagogue Temple Shalom. But now, Balin, a man in his 20s, felt he should adopt a more Orthodox Jewish practice. Soon, though, questions were being raised about his family's Jewish bona fides. When his Orthodox advisors and friends found out Balin's mother's mother, his grandmother Linda, had been an Italian Catholic before converting to Judaism in Montreal to marry his grandfather, Jay Schechter, that conversion was certified by a conservative board of rabbis, so the Orthodox don't consider Balin to be Jewish at all. Hearing this was deeply painful. When Kai was little, he loved dressing up, pretending to be a rabbi, and he's got the home movies to prove it. The rejection turned into a crisis of faith for him, and he had to figure out where he belonged, or even if he wanted anything to do with a religion that didn't want him.
And I wanted to be in a place where I was welcome. That maybe I'm lazy, but I didn't want to be in a place where I had to prove myself that I was Jewish even to begin with. I wanted to be in a place where I was already Jewish. And maybe if this never happened, maybe I would have kept getting more and more into Orthodoxy if I always felt like I was accepted and I was one of them.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Friday, August 15th, 2025. Welcome to North Star, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Kai Balin's new film might sound a little like the 2024 Hollywood blockbuster called A Real Pain. It starred Kieran Culkin and Jesse Eisenberg, who play cousins who go to Poland on a pilgrimage to honor their Holocaust survivor grandmother. Balin's film honors his Holocaust survivor ancestors too, but his movie didn't have quite the same budget or the A-list actors, and Balin scraped together the funds himself and enlisted his whole family to help make the film. The Son of a Seeker film is the result of his trip that spanned 3 continents, including stops in Poland, Hungary, Romania, Italy, and Israel, but also filmed in Vancouver at home, showing deeply vulnerable conversations with his family. And spoiler alert, his father, Jeffrey Balin, reveals another family secret decades old about whether he too was Jewish enough. You see, Jeffrey's dad was a Jewish Holocaust survivor, but his mother was the daughter of a Hungarian Catholic woman who had converted to Judaism before the war to marry his grandfather. In 1942, she converted back when the Nazis captured her husband. That's how she survived and kept her children alive. But to find out what path Kai Balin ultimately has chosen, he joins me now from Vancouver. It's a real honor to meet you.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, congratulations on the premiere of your film. Before we get started, though, I would like just to find out some of the timelines, details, sort of when did you start filming?
So I actually started filming in about August of 2024. So I had to get creative with recreating some stuff, which was mainly the catalyst of this journey was first October 7th and my interest in pursuing Judaism and then Orthodox Judaism. And then the catalyst of it all really was when my mom told me that we weren't even considered Jewish by the Orthodox. So then I went on a whole nother identity crisis, soul searching journey. And I recount that in my film, but I had to get creative in terms of using footage to kind of tell the story as well, and recreating it.
Well, I mean, we get to see how cute you were. So you were delicious when you were little, with pretending to be a rabbi. Well, you were a convincing rabbi, I have to say. If anyone wants to see what a rabbi looks like at like 7 years old or something, you were it. And this journey you took with your sister to your roots, Poland and Romania and Hungary. When was that?
We started with my sister in the fall of November and basically the whole month there.
I want to go back to the reason why you did this film. And I'm sure people have said to you, have you seen the movie with Jesse Eisenberg, The Real Pain, when they even go back to their roots? Had that not come out before you started this or at all influenced your idea?
I remember I was on the Times of Israel website in Poland in November, and I was, like getting ready to go to Auschwitz, and I saw an article about this new film coming out. I'm like, oh my God, this film's about. And honestly, there's a bit of, you don't want to be a copy. Like, oh, is there a bit of copying here? But I actually, and I don't watch movies twice usually. I've seen that movie 4 times. I really like it and I really connect to it. And I see the beauty of it, but I also see how different it is to my film in a sense, because there feels like in my film, there feels like there's something not more at stake, but I just feel like going to these places for me, there was so much on the line in the sense of defining who I was and my identity. I think that ran in Eisenberg's film as well.
Of course it did. Absolutely. But it was also an interpersonal thing. But, you and your sister had this moment where she was like, I already know who I am. You got to figure yourself out.
Yeah, but they knew they were Jews and they were going back, and they came across as very secular. Going to Europe was me at the time trying to prove to myself, am I even Jewish? And so that's where it feels like our stories kind of really divert. Because to me, to go to Europe was trying to get this affirmation of, am I even part of this story? Am I even part of this lineage of Judaism? And that's where I feel like our Real Pain and Son of a Sikh are quite different.
You said that, when October 7th happened, you're from Vancouver and you went to VTT. Are you okay did you know Ben Mizrahi? Was he a classmate of yours, or he was a little older than you?
Yeah, I think he was my sister's age.
Mhm. So it hit personal to home.
It did.
Your school got
Yeah.
very, very personal. And I wonder, some people classify themselves as October 8th Jews. And I wonder what that means to you. You see yourself as that or no?
Yeah. But no, I was just
They found a reason to reconnect, to getting, that's what I meant.
yeah, I was living in Nashville when October 7th happened. But I would say, yeah, I was relatively disconnected. I remember like I went to Yom Kippur services in September, which was I hadn't done that in many years. So maybe it was starting already, that wanting to connect. And I mentioned I tried to be as transparent in my documentary as possible. Like I was very disconnected, and I show a montage of me finding myself and weird haircuts and tattoos and stuff.
Tattoos, yeah. Your parents are like, don't send me pictures.
Yeah, I know they weren't too happy, but they've got used to it. I just have 2, by the way, so I didn't go all out, but
I've got one too. It's not a big thing.
yeah, nice. So yeah, but it did spark something, and I mean, in the documentary, I really do talk about the progression of how it led to my way of fighting back. I had spent a few years prior, I was started getting more and more into spirituality and meditating and more Eastern thought and reading certain books and really kind of understanding that world. And then I felt like October 7th was the signal I needed to shift that energy of spirituality and stuff to Judaism and start to look into the depths of that and try to understand from something higher, why did this tragedy happen? And then also the part of wanting to be a part of this story. And when forces tried to erase us, like this was going to be my way to respond and to, instead of to hide, or instead not even, maybe to join the army, or maybe to like be rah 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 on pro Israel. Like my what felt in my heart, my path was to dig deep into the text, to start to rap tefillin every day, to start to live a more religious life. That felt like my calling after October 7th, and in response to the mass murdering of Jews on that day.
I mean, many, many people did and still do and felt called to that community and to bring light and to bring kindness and goodness and mitzvahs to the world. And, everyone has their way of contributing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, my relationship to Judaism right now is a lot more. It feels a lot more aligned with who I am, and I, because I had went through a lot of challenges and really went face to face with a lot of my fears and a lot of people that were telling me difficult things to digest. Ultimately, out of that, I felt like I found a Judaism that's, I am more secure in, and it doesn't need to necessarily adhere to everything to feel enough or to feel Jewish enough. I got a lot of that inspiration actually from my mom and sister, who have this innate knowing of their Judaism, and they don't need to keep kosher or keep Shabbat to feel that. A million people can tell them they're not something, but if they feel that internally, I mean, that's extremely powerful. So I really honed in a lot of that in this journey, and I tried to show that a bit too in some key scenes.
Look, I have friends who were told, well, you're not Jewish enough, or are your parents Jewish, or are your grandparents? And you have to prove it in order, let's say, get married in an Orthodox synagogue or Chabad synagogue, for example. It was so infuriating and insulting to the people that faced that. And I would have probably been like, well, screw you. Who are you to tell me? It would get my back up. And I know that's not how it only went down to you. So I'd love to hear a bit about all the different emotions you went through when you guys found out that in order to be accepted by an Orthodox Jewish tradition, you weren't considered Jews at all.
Yeah, so, why I felt like it was pivotal to have my dad's story is because he did find out years before, and it wasn't as much trying to keep it a secret as it was just not relevant, because I was, as I show in my film, I was quite disconnected from my Judaism. So if he said, "Oh, by the way, the Orthodox don't consider us Jewish," I wouldn't have really cared probably. Originally, I was just going to keep the story more about me, but my sister actually pushed to have us both in it, because it's really interesting how we both face this rejection. And it also talks to like the greater idea of, when we say in the Amidah, like when we talk about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob being our fathers, like to me, it's like something greater at work. There's a story that's great at work that I believe that our human minds can't comprehend, how these synchronicities happen with our ancestors or with our parents. Even in this case, my dad, we had this, both faced this rejection. So when he found out, which was actually years prior,
2016, yeah.
he didn't tell me because I wasn't connected to that.
But it was devastating for him. He went through heartbreak.
He went through a longer process for sure, because he knew his grandmother to be Christian. And so, like I say in my film, 3 of his grandparents were Jews and they survived. 2 of them were perished in the Holocaust. And this one remaining grandparent, who he only met once in Budapest when he was 14, disqualified any legitimacy of his Judaism, even at that time at Reform as well. Because if your maternal grandmother wasn't Jewish, then your mother wasn't Jewish and you weren't Jewish. And I mean, he faced a lot of difficult things. He did then, what was it called? Like a reaffirmation. He went to be considered by the Reform and Conservative. He went into the mikvah and had a drop of blood taken, and that then considered him Jewish according to Reform and
But
Conservative.
he had to convert basically twice if he was going to technically. That was the first time, and then the Orthodox one would have been a year study and a whole thing. And
Right. And he was willing to do that because he really did love it. So for me, where our paths diverge is that, they told me, okay, well, you're not Jewish, or you're not Jewish according to halacha, but it's great because you get to choose. And what really hurt me the most was being told, like, right now you're a b'nai Noach. B'nai Noach, it's someone that just has to keep the 7 commandments. It's basically a euphemism of saying you're not a Jew, I believe. And so that hurt because for me, like, being Jewish is so much more, and that's what I tried. The intention of this film wasn't to create a analytical, like, what considers someone Jewish, what's not, and it was really to show the hurt of what happens when you're told you're not something, especially in the wake of October 7th, especially having grandparents that survived the Holocaust, and they're having ancestors that perished. And then the fact that I was dressing as a rabbi as a kid, and what was being told to me is, like, as someone who enjoys spirituality and connects to it, some people were saying in the Orthodox world and Chabad type of people were like, your soul is not Jewish right now, but if you convert properly, then your soul will be Jewish. And I was like, I was dressing as a rabbi as a little kid. Is that not something in the soul that is Jewish? Again, I don't know who's right or wrong. For whatever reason, I believe something from higher than myself put this will and this fire in me to ultimately create this and to show it because it just was important to me.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
You could make Aliyah to Israel, as it turns out now, because you have a law of return. You qualify now. Spoiler alert, we're not going to say anything, but spoiler alert, right?
I would have qualified before, yeah, because it gets complicated, and this is a whole nother thing, and this is what I ultimately didn't want to focus on the film is this making Aliyah, the state of Israel, what they consider a Jew versus the rabbinate, because the rabbinate is controlled by very religious rabbis, and the state of Israel, it's much more flexible. And I say that in the film that I'm considered Jewish, but because the dominant voice of Judaism in Israel is Orthodoxy, or at least how I perceived it at the time, and I think there is still a lot of truth in that. If they didn't accept me, then even though I could have made Aliyah, I didn't feel Jewish enough, and that was all internal. Like, no one was wrong, I guess. I really didn't want to point the finger at anyone because I just wanted to show what it's like when someone of who I am is told that, and told that, you're not Jewish. And the Orthodox said, yeah, you can convert the proper way, but that to me on two ends, it said that's not necessarily who I am to follow the rules. But then it was all or nothing. That's how it was being phrased. It's like you either keep everything and you're in the club, and if you don't, you're nothing. And I just, that really stung, and that really hurt. And I believed it at the time. I'm like, well, maybe I'm just meant to be nothing. Versus my sister and my mom, who's like, yeah, we don't have to keep kosher, we don't have to keep Shabbat, but we are Jewish, and no one can take that away from us. And I captured those moments in the film just organically when my mom said, I'm Jewish and no one could take that away from me. And my sister, when she started to tear up and said, don't belittle my Judaism just because you don't know your own. For whatever reason, I just set up the camera and it evoked that response. And I think that was my biggest problem with this, is that I didn't want to have to already prove I was Jewish, and I didn't want to have to do something that wasn't me, but I still wanted to be Jewish. And I think ultimately, as I found security in my Judaism, what I was compelled to is to go to, for example, conservative, where they do accept me. I've been going to the Vancouver conservative synagogue. Basically, well, I've been traveling now for the last month, but basically every Shabbat I was there. They still follow the Cohen and Levi and then the Israelite Aliyah system. So, when a Levi was called, sometimes I would get called up to do an Aliyah, and that was a special feeling for sure.
So where are you living at the moment, or you're in Vancouver now?
I've been in Vancouver the last year, and like I said, I'm going to Toronto in the next few days, and we'll have our premiere at the Al Green Theatre on August 20th. And then actually I'm going back to Israel. I'm doing a Beit Midrash program with Mabua. It's called Mabua. It's it brings secular and religious people together, and young people to study for 40 days about Talmud and Western philosophy.
Do you
and-
want to make Aliyah now that you've done this film and come to terms with how you are in Judaism at the moment?
I think when the dust settles, I think I'll be in Israel. I don't know. There's something deep in my heart that just but it's almost like a not a toxic relationship. Just you feel so much there, but you also feel the both extremes. I've had some very challenging times in Israel when I've lived there, and really kind of heart clenching feelings, but also the most amazing feelings I've ever felt. So
you're going to become a rabbi?
you know what? I wouldn't put it off yet, though. The thing that honestly stops me the most is the fear of studying for like 5 years. And but I think this program will be a good warm up, especially it will be all in Hebrew and it'll be long days and lectures. I think my goal with that is to really just take what I take away from it. I remember in school, I just always, you're reading the syllabus on the first day of a university lecture, and I'm so overwhelmed that I check out from the beginning. And I think all these years,
You're a lot older than that now.
Yeah.
You're 18, going off to Western to do.
Exactly, 6 years of deep soul searching, I feel I'm more of an equilibrium, and I feel like I'll just be able to be more okay with whatever I take away from it. But I don't know. My dad mentioned the other day, he's like, I think you would be a good rabbi. I mean, he said it a few times, but we were on the cruise ship. We were just on a cruise ship, and we did it was really cool actually, because there's thousands of people on this cruise ship, and we did a Friday night service together. And this guy who was a rabbi in the army, he led it. And but I was like, I loved it. And I was saying, like, and I said a few things, I made a few jokes, and like, for example, anyways, and then I said we need to pray. Where's east? We need to look to Jerusalem, because we weren't looking east. And I don't know, I said a few things in there, and I was saying the prayers pretty loud. And my dad, he said, you'd make a good rabbi. You're very personable, and you have that love for Judaism. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but I wouldn't count it out. I actually, yeah.
In your
So
blood, it's in your breath, everything, all your home movies,
yeah, Yeah.
your school projects.
it touched people because it makes these thought-provoking questions of who is Jewish and who is not. And the main goal of this was just to open conversation, and I hope to just continue to learn. And now, as I find more security and quite secure now in my Judaism and where I am in it, I'm starting to put on tefillin again. Like, I'm starting to get connected because I feel enough already. And that was the big theme of my film, is being enough. It's a huge blessing to have, for whatever reason, this film to be made and now be slowly starting to share it, and hopefully more sharing and more festivals and just as much as possible.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of North Star, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Balin's film has been accepted as an official entry by the Vancouver International Film Festival, and he's hoping other festivals will pick it up. You can learn more about Son of a Seeker and buy tickets at the links in our show notes. Meanwhile, he's heading to Israel soon to study Judaism. Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman and Andrea Varsany. The executive producer is Michael Freeman, and the music is by Brett Higgins. Thanks for listening.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.